Welcome back to the For All the Saints podcast, and I am delighted to have with me Jeffery Borders, the author of the new book from Plain and Precious Publishing, The Antichrist Playbook. Well done on the book, and welcome to the show, Jeff. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Ben. I'm glad to be on with you.
So, Antichrist Playbook, is a very specific topic to focus on the antichrists and what they're doing. Why this topic and not, like spiritual gifts, or why you love beaches, or, you could have picked anything to write about. Why this?
And gosh, there's so many things you could write about. And this particular thing stuck out to me. I was teaching a lesson in the preschool on Sherem. So at the end of Jacob, where Jacob is having kind of that showdown with Sherem. And he kind of uses these methods that have been, I started to see a pattern in the Book of Mormon, and I thought, shoot, if Sherem is using all these different tactics, do all the other, antichrists in the Book of Mormon, do they use the same tactics over and over again? And that led me kind of down a rabbit hole, and I saw some things happening in the life in our family, just kind of around the periphery, and I just felt an overwhelming inspiration to write this for youth specifically, and for parents, leaders of youth. There just seems that the devil is working hard to get us out of the church, and I wanted to offer some kind of sort of, maybe not necessarily counter arguments, because there's a lot of books out there that do apologetics. That's not what this is. This is literally just kind of showing the tactics that are used, so that when you see them, you can know what they are.
So what specific? That's really interesting. What specifics have you been seeing? Not to go into personal things about your family, but that you work with youth, and you have worked with youth in your previous religious affiliations too, and serving with youth now, I assume. So
Yeah.
what kind of actual specifics are you seeing?
Right. The biggest one that I saw was kind of the flattery one, and it was very nuanced. It was, hey, you're going to it either came in the form of platitudes like, um, you lived your best life, you do you, those types of things that kind of feel you can take whatever message you get from it. And there's a lot of people out there pushing those kind of vague flattery platitudes. But also I've seen many content creators saying you're going to live more fully, you're going to be more free outside of the church. You get all this freedom back, you get whatever back that you're not getting inside of the church. And that's effective when people start, well, yeah, I do sacrifice a lot of time and effort to the church. Maybe I need some of that back, or I'm sacrificing my tithing. Maybe I shouldn't be sacrificing my tithing, because I can have all of this XYZ, and it's this kind of flattery that leads people to sort of second guess maybe what they've been living, and then these other rules that can be propped on top of it that just destroy or deconstruct somebody's faith.
That's really interesting. So you've said that Sherem was kind of the catalyst for this book, and studying him. And well, let's go to Jacob 7, shall we?
Yeah.
I've got it on here. Hopefully this works, because that fits in exactly with what you're saying. So obviously we have Jacob 7, 1-20. Let me just read that, and we can see the flattery comes straight away. And now it came to pass, after some years had passed away, there came a man among the people of Nephi, whose name was Sherem. And it came to pass that he began to preach among the people, and to declare unto them that there should be no Christ. And he preached many things which were flattering unto the people. And this he did, that he might overthrow the doctrine of Christ. It goes on to verse 4, and he was learned, that he had a perfect knowledge of the language of the people, wherefore he could use much flattery and much power of speech, according to the power of the devil. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. He goes on to it talks that he was very logical, he was very reasonable, which goes along with that. So yeah, tell us about this. This is how you open the book, really, is focusing on flattery. Teach us about this, if you will.
Yeah, and specifically, maybe not. I think it doesn't say specifically what Sherem was teaching that was flattering the people away. But obviously he knew how to manipulate through words to get people to follow him. And one of the ways that he did it is that um, he was criticizing the Jacob for not keeping the law of Moses, or the law of Moses the way that he saw it should be kept, um, and got people to start to question um, Jacob and his preaching. Um, Really, you kind of get a deep dive into what flattery is when you get to Korihor in Alma 30, when he starts to teach things that are pleasing to the carnal mind, and things that just make us happier in the instant, or things that we think might make us happy in the instant. This kind of instantaneous pleasure that they're searching for, things that Nehor taught and Amosai taught and Korihor taught, these things that are pleasing to the natural man, um, that could get us to easily go after those things instead of things that might require a little endurance on our part to obtain something joyful.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it says that this form of flattery was used to, it was successful in leading many people away.
Yeah.
And we see today in the church, there are a huge number of converts, but you also hear of loud people leaving as well.
Hmm.
And they, you have some people on YouTube and otherwhere saying they're leaving in droves, which I don't think is true, but nonetheless, I think,
I don't
um,
think that's true either.
yeah, and yet, you know, they are using flattery and it is working. Yeah, how is flattery being used today from, you know, like, what are you seeing in people leaving, and what is effective in terms of flattery? What should we look out for specifically?
Yeah, I won't say the individual's name because I don't want to give him any more credit than he has on the internet, but um, sort of debunked this video that he had when I was on Ward Radio. Essentially, you're hearing stuff like you get the you get the best life when you're out of the church. You get the best friends. You get your time back. You get your money back. You get all these different things. It sounds like a country song. All these things that you get back if you play it backwards. Sorry, a silly American joke there, but um, you know, and it may not seem like it works, but when I have talked to people who have deconstructed their faith or left the church, I think the one thing I hear the most is that I'm more free now, or I
Hmm.
get to have more freedom, and that has caused me to stop and ponder, like, what do they mean by that? What do they mean by I have more freedom? I don't have to go to church on Sunday. I'm not tied down to a calling. I, and I have yet to really get a good answer of what they mean by I'm more free, other than I can do these things that I couldn't do before. I mean, you can do everything. I mean, you can still go out and do stuff on Sunday. No one's stopping you, you know, except for your own covenants and promises. But so I don't really know. It is an effective message. I don't, that's all I can say about it.
It kind of makes me think about the arguments for and against having a dog. It's
Right.
like, yeah, well, I'm more free without a dog. It's like, yeah, but there's all the benefits to having a dog. It's not such a black and white thing. But it's really
I was just,
interesting.
I was just
Sorry,
having
go on.
this sorry, I was just having this conversation with somebody at work with she said that their kid, that her oldest son, and his wife are having a baby. And for the longest time, they didn't want to have a baby because they were going to lose their freedom. And I said, do they know how much they gain? Do they know how much they gain by having kids, though? Like, they're this narrow scope of what freedom is. So, and you would know that you have a brand new baby. So
Yes, yeah, I'm loving it. But it's like, I feel like it's my purpose, and it's like I wouldn't have any freedom if my parents didn't give birth to me. So
that's right. That's
they,
right. And you have a new joy
yeah,
in your life. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So where does this vulnerability to flattery come from?
I think anytime anybody is speaking something that maybe hits an inner dialogue that we have going on already, or we just generally like when people are being nice and kind to us or saying things that kind of um, fit within our inner narrative of how life is going or life should be. Um, it's easy when someone's giving you these nice warm fuzzies and you want to listen to them. So
It reminds me of that phrase that's being thrown about a bit more recently, toxic compassion,
yeah,
and
toxic empathy or
how
toxic compassion. Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of like when you have a baby and that baby is completely reliant on you, it's like, of course, you will be fully compassionate and fully helping, but it gets to a point where actually having that level of compassion can be disadvantageous and counterintuitive to
yeah.
what you hope they will achieve. And I guess that plays to some of your other rules as well. Well, let's go on to another rule. So
Okay.
you've coined a term in the book, kind of third wave anti-Mormonism. A lot of the deception and the undermining of sacred things, as you say in there, can actually come from within the church and not from outside, which is quite surprising. So, I mean, could you tell me the Book of Mormon base for this rule and kind of what led you to putting this as a key element of your book?
Absolutely. It's going to take me a second to get there, but it's in Korihor argument against Alma. So Alma chapter 30, he mocks the what he calls the pretend mysteries is what he calls them. Um, and if you're studying the scriptures, and one of the Greek meanings of mysteries is temple rites or ordinances. Um, and this is Alma chapter 30:28. Yea, they durst not make use of that which is their own, lest they should offend their priests, who do yoke them according to their desires, and have brought them to believe by their traditions and their dreams and their whims and their visions and their pretend mysteries, that they should, if they do not do according to their words, offend some unknown being, who they say is God, a being who never was seen or known, and never was nor ever will be. So not only is he mocking the rituals of the church and the rites and the prophecy that the prophets are having, but he's also in that instance becoming an atheist apparently and denying that there is a God. Um, and so you kind of see this when people, I would say these attacks seem to come from people who are members that start to mock some of these sacred things that they've done in a temple. I've seen plenty of videos out there mocking, proxy baptisms or putting on your ceremonial temple clothing in a video to show people how weird it is. Um, and I could just see Korihor at that time doing something similar, showing these people these are just silly traditions. These are nothing, and get them to kind of devalue the sacred things in their life, um, and see them as something weird or strange or something like that.
I feel like you see this it's quite a common thing as well.
Hmm.
If I don't know whether that's more of a modern thing, but why do you think that is? Because it seems so strange to me that you would adhere yourself to and espouse upon yourself a religious affiliation if you have no respect for it. Um, what do you think the motivation is behind those who do this?
Do you mean like why don't they walk away from the church, and why do they feel the need to continue to mock it? Is that what you're?
Yeah, like if you're a member of the church, if you claim to be a member of the church, then
Yeah,
why kind of from within mock it? It's like, well, just go.
yeah.
No
I
one's
don't.
stopping
I
you.
don't. I don't know what leads people to down that road. I honestly don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. I wish I knew the answer.
Yeah, it's I find that a very strange one. But as I said, I feel like it's become a a little more common.
Yeah,
And yeah, I don't understand it either. But I think of specific examples that again I feel I feel like I can't cite. But at the same time, you know, there's an aspect of it where you find a balance of like, well, it's also good to hold up a mirror to yourself and maybe think
absolutely.
about what you're doing, but not get into the mocking stages of it. But have you
Yeah.
seen this? You mentioned the temple, but have you seen this with kind of prophets as well? And I feel like it comes up a lot at General Conference, mocking General Conference.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it used to be that, you know, uh, so I'm a convert, so seeing protesters outside of a church was weird to me. So the first time I saw protesters that outside of like a temple open house or general conference, I thought, well, this is strange. But that was kind of without the church. That those were people outside of the church. And so to get the first time I heard somebody stand up and yell no during general conference during its sustaining, I thought, holy mackerel, we gotta there's something going on in the church. Um, Within the church, there are people who have a problem with, I don't know if it's with the brethren, if it's with the prophet, um, with authority. That seems to be some of these antichrists. They didn't like somebody claiming authority from God to be able to um, dictate the way, maybe dictate isn't the word, receive commandment from the Lord about how they should appropriately live their lives. Um, they didn't want someone to tell them what was right and wrong. Um, and I think that's probably where it comes from is when the prophets start to teach about morality and moral things, that's when you start to get the criticism of the brethren. If they're just teaching a um, small little Jesus is love type of message, you don't get as much pushback. But when Neil Anderson comes out and teaches on abortion, you get a ton of pushback. Um, so uh, I think it's the morals that people push back against when it rubs up against, again, some internal dialogue that they have going on. Um, those seem to get the most criticisms, or Dallin H. Oaks or Jeffrey R. Holland. Elder Gong doesn't seem to get those kind of criticisms. It's the ones that are a little bit more um, maybe fire and brimstone. I don't know. That's probably not the word. That's something from my background, as a Protestant, but that's kind of what it reminds me of. So
See, how can you not like Elder Gong?
yeah, no, I
That's
love
right.
Elder Gong. Yeah,
He's just too likable.
yeah,
No, but that's true, and it's interesting for me because you shouldn't judge people, and I guess that's where it's hard to do. If you want to help someone, it's you feel like you are judging them first by even thinking that they need help or something. But
right.
there was a study done that showed that the it showed the happiness levels between someone who claimed to believe in a faith and those who claimed to believe in a faith and actually lived the faith according to their belief, and those who didn't
Hmm.
weren't aligned with their actual beliefs. And the people who didn't live their religion, the religion they claimed to be, had the same happiness levels and levels of meaning in their life as an atheist. However, the people who claimed and believed in a religion but lived according to that religion increased in happiness so much. It was something to sort of it was equivalent to a financial pay rise, but it was massive. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It seems strange to me. It's almost counterintuitive and making yourself less happy if you were to kick against it, rather than just to say this may not be perfect, but I'm going to live according to what I've been taught, because there's aspects to it. Because I do think there's a lot of people doing that who almost have this level of activism of like, well, I love the church and I love these selective parts of the doctrine and I want to keep those bits and I want to improve the rest. And it's like, well, you'll be much happier and find much more meaning in it if you just live according to it and let those who are supposed to move it forward, move it forward. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, it almost seems like they're putting their hope in a change to come that may or may not come, rather than a hope in Jesus Christ and working with what they have. Um, and just anecdotally from my own life, I can say, when I'm doing the things that the prophets have taught me to do, I definitely am happier and I'm more joyful. And when I'm not, I'm a little bit more irritable, and you know, I'm not as nice to work with, and maybe my family notices it more. But um, and I that's the kind of the personal anecdotal side of how the gospel affects me and my family, and so
It's also this feeling, avoiding inner conflict of, President Nelson spoke about confidence before God, spiritual confidence. And I've recited a few times a talk I love by Elder Clemengat, Approaching the Throne of God with Confidence. And it's like, at least if you know you're doing the things that you've been taught to, even whether you might, they might challenge your faith a little bit or something like that, at least you can have that confidence before God to say, I know I've got the Spirit with me because I'm doing those things that we read of in the Book of Mormon and that we hear at General Conference. I'm able to say that I'm living according to what I do believe,
mhm.
and then you have that confidence before God when you go before in prayer, when you're asking for blessings, when you're requesting
Yeah,
these things. So that alignment and the disalignment, I think, is really significant and can affect you daily. I know when I've been misaligned with my beliefs, it's much harder, as you say. It's much more
yeah.
irritable. Interestingly, is this Antichrist phenomenon a thing that is unique to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or have you seen it in Protestantism as well? This kind of insider um, Antichrists.
I did well. I left the Presbyterian Church when I was 19, so I don't know if I had enough time to really look inside and see what was occurring internally within the church there. It eventually the Presbyterian Church split over matters of morality into two groups. So there was probably something going on internally
Right.
that I wasn't aware of. Internal advocacy for certain things. Um, so I don't know that I can answer that fully because I don't know the answer to that. It I think it's like one of those things where, it's like when you get a new car and now everyone on the road has that same car. Um, because I'm looking for it because I have it. And now that have joined the church, maybe I'm just seeing it in the LDS sphere because that's what I'm looking at. So,
Yeah, that's fair enough. So let's go on to a very interesting point of your book, which is about niceness culture. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because I don't know. I still feel on the fence about this. Yeah, I feel like there's differing points of view on um, niceness culture and the kind of what should replace niceness culture, and you hear it quite a lot. But yeah, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this because maybe it's more the application. I've always admired President Monson and think I don't know, I think he would advocate for a niceness culture. He always used to say, I have wept in the night for the shortness of sight that to somebody's need made me blind, but I never have yet felt a tinge of regret, for being a little too kind.
yeah, yeah. And I
I
think,
don't know. Let's hear from you about that.
I think that, and I might just be splitting hairs. I think there's a difference between niceness and kindness. And the way I explain this to my kids, my older boys who are dating is, um, if a girl says to you, he's really nice, there's usually a but following that. Um,
Yeah.
it usually,
The nice
it
guy never
usually
gets the girl.
that yeah, like to me, niceness almost is equivalent with acquiescence in some circumstances. Um, Not willing to stand up and for what you believe in, just being steamrolled, or for the sake of not looking contentious, or I don't want to look unchristlike. I've experienced that in my own life where it might the charge might have been leveled that you are being unchristlike when I didn't feel like I was being unchristlike. Um, I felt like I was speaking the truth, um, and I was being as kind as possible while I was doing it. Um, but that seemed to equate niceness with sort of this level, this you're not being Christ-like if you're not acquiescing or affirming something that you disagree with. Um, and so I kind of had to take a step back and go, okay, what are we really talking about? Um, and I think Latter-day Saints, as a rule, in general, go along to get along. We are always the nice people in society. Um, we have a reputation for being the nice people. Um, but there are times when niceness is almost overrun by people because they know we're nice and they know that we won't say anything back or and you can still speak for truth while being kind and benevolent. Um, so I think like the end of Elder was that President Monson's quote there. He talked about being kind, right? I feel like I don't think the scriptures ever say be nice to people. They do say be kind, and I think there's a differentiation there. It may be minor, but I think there is a differentiation there.
Yeah,
Does that
I
make
think
sense?
I think there's a fair point. I think there's two ways that you could think about or approach it, and it's hard to find the balance. So you have Miyamoto Musashi famously said, "It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a battlefield." And there's a really profound translation of the word meekness that says sword sheathed, and
Hmm.
I think that's really profound. And it'd be interesting. We'll get to that in a second. But the other way to look at it is you look at how the church responded to the Book of Mormon musical, and the creators of the Book of Mormon musical said, "We knew we couldn't do this about the Jews. We knew we couldn't do this about the Muslims. We knew we couldn't even do it about the Catholics because, as you say, there would be a backlash.
Oh,
However,
totally. Yeah.
we knew that the Mormons, the Latter Day Saints, they're too nice, so that we wouldn't get a backlash. And what you had instead was the church bought out all of the adverts in the program and did this huge marketing campaign. And it would be interesting to think, did that was that I don't know, was that a sign of weakness that we didn't stand up like other faiths, or that we were sort of overrun in that we were taken advantage of because they knew we were kind? I don't know. It would be great to get your thoughts on that tension and how we balance that.
I actually think that was kind of a genius move. It was sort of
Oh yeah,
uh, a creative non-compliance, if you will.
it's a great way of putting it. Yeah, yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I can think of it's I think it's Christ in the Sermon on the Mount when he's talking about, if someone compels you to go a mile, go the second mile. And if you really look into kind of the history of that, in the Roman era, they could compel a Jew to walk a mile, but if they made and carry their armor, but if they made them walk the second mile, that was illegal. And so Christ is in a way is saying, be a creative nonconformist here and show them the ridiculousness of what they're doing. Um, and I was actually surprised in The Chosen in season 4, this actually came up. So the Romans made all the apostles and Jesus walk with their armor, and when they got to the mile, they tried to take their armor back, and Jesus just kept walking to show them the ridiculousness of what they were doing. Kind of this creative, assertive nonviolence way of talking. And so I think by buying an ad in the Book of Mormon, it was sort of like we're addressing this, but we're addressing it in a creative, non-violent sort of way, and we're going to show you. Um, and that's kind of where I went with this book. Is like I'm not coming out to call anybody an antichrist. That's not my aim. Um, it was sort of a creative way to show the ridiculousness of the arguments that are being made in order to drive people away from the faith, without poking individual people and starting a fight that I really didn't want to be in, because I consider myself. I- I've been accused of being nice on occasion. I try to consider myself to be a kind person, but I also am interested in finding ways to um, serve in the Lord's battalion that are creative and assertive, nonviolent sort of ways to reach the gospel out to people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. And as you talk, it's making me think of other examples, and maybe there's a big element of picking your battles here, and
Yeah.
you know,
What hill are you going
uh,
to die on?
yeah, and I think yes, that was a cool, genius move that the church did. But actually, when you look at other things that are very central to the church's doctrine and protecting religious freedom, standing up for and defending the
Hmm.
family, um, that those are moments where we do see that, where there's a very clear stand and there's not compromise on that, which I think is really interesting in what you say. Um, yeah, so I think that's a really interesting balance, though. I mean, how do you apply this to youth? What are you saying to youth? Because we're kind of talking on an organizational level. Um,
Right.
what do you say to youth with this?
I've had these discussions with my kids, so that's what I'm going to apply it to. Um, they have discussions at school. There are a decent amount of Latter-day Saints in our area, but um, in in I assume it's similar to where you live. We're kind of the diaspora of Mormonism. You know, we don't live in the Utah, Idaho, Arizona corridor, so they have plenty of opportunities to engage with people um, outside of the faith who have questions, um, or have heard things. They've seen things on TikTok, they've seen things on Instagram, and they have plenty of opportunities to assert their beliefs. And in fact, my son just the other day had a discussion about the Trinity with somebody at school. Um, and it could have become heated, but he tried to logically, walk them through what he believed first, um, and then tried to show them, where things were similar, where things were different. Um, he could have easily backed away from it at school. Like, who wants to have that discussion at your lunch at school, while you're just trying to eat your lunch, But he decided it was an opportunity to maybe correct a false assumption about what we believe. Um, and he doesn't always do that. But when the opportunity presents itself and when directed by the Spirit, he does. They do stand up and speak out about what they believe in. And oftentimes he'll employ humor. I kind of try to do that in the book. I think humor
Yeah.
kind of um, settles people a little bit, especially if it's self-deprecating a little bit. Um, and and I think that's probably what the church did in the case of the Book of Mormon musical, is they used a little humor on their side to kind of defuse the tension. So
Yeah, no, I love that. It's great when you observe a recent example of this when Heretic came out and the Secret Lives of Mormon
oh yeah,
Wives, and
yep,
we had the church released quite a firm statement, and the church didn't enter a battle per se with these. It wasn't a really, it was firm, but it wasn't like didn't call them out as such. But I think what it did do is give permission for members of the church to stand up, because I think, as you say, sometimes maybe our culture is one where we're not sure when we should stand up and when we should just be nice and affirm, or be silent or whatever.
well,
Whereas I think this was a very clear, come on, let's be ambassadors, let's stand up for this, and people did. That was the thing. It was really great to see people respond to those big Hollywood projects, in
and
a
I
in a
think,
really faith promoting way.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think that um, I don't know if people are waiting for permission to engage. and they think the church is going to engage on every front, which it just can't do. Um, the giant global organization, it cannot do that on every single minutia. So I think it actually is a call for action for members to be able to stand up and share their beliefs and correct misassumptions in a kind, loving manner, and to teach what is actually going on. Like you said, with the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I thought it was great that a bunch of LDS women got together and made the book this Secret Lives of Real Mormon Wives. I mean, that was creative way of kind of going back at it without being, adversarial in the process. That was pretty interesting. So, um, or just people discussing the movie Heretic or something like that, or American Primeval or other shows that are
Mm.
displaying the church in kind of this or church culture in sort of a negative light. I had so many people ask me about the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives at work, and it it would have been so easy to just walk away from those conversations like this is a bunch of garbage. I don't want to talk about it, but it really did lead to some humorous conversations about um, church culture, things that people thought, and so it was fun. It actually led to good conversations. We used it for, you know, proselytizing.
Yeah, oh yeah. My wife loved it. She can't wait for series 2. She really enjoyed. It's interesting for us, as I'm sure maybe it is for you too. Is we're not there in Utah, so it's quite interesting to
I'm like,
watch
I
that.
don't
Uh,
understand any of this.
yeah,
Yeah,
neither did I. So that was really interesting. But yeah, it's a great point in your book, and I think it's a really interesting discussion and tension to find there, and especially it's something, as you say, that youth need to be equipped at is when to stand up, how to stand up, and I guess I love that you're leading by example with the book. That what talents do you have, and what expertise do you have that can contribute to the kingdom and help you to be an effective ambassador for truth
yep,
and light.
yep.
um,
And that's what
and
we need.
yeah, we don't just need online arguments. I don't think that's the point of what you're trying to say at all. Is to
No,
enter into keyboard warrior battles. It's to stand up and be a light and actually defend truth in the creative ways, like with the Book of Mormon musical ad campaign.
yeah.
Which I thought again
And
was
I,
really cool.
and I actually point that out in one of the chapters, which is the anger chapter. Like that's not what we're aiming for because the Antichrist in the Book of Mormon were always trying to quell up anger. They were always trying to rile people up to get them angry about something, and that's not how you have a discussion about anything. It always leads to crazy comments or trolling somebody's, Facebook feed or whatever it is, and that's not how you have dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you've done in the book is you've learned a lot from the Antichrist of the Book of Mormon, and I'm wondering if you can give us some top tips from the protagonists in the Book of Mormon for how we can act in those similar situations when we experience flattery, when we feel angry, when it kind of follows on from this discussion that we've had. But what are
Yeah,
some key things you've been inspired by the protagonists of the Book of Mormon?
yeah, I love how. Well, I'm gonna start with Jacob because that's where we started this. I love that Jacob seems to keep his cool with with Sherem. It doesn't talk about him getting angry. Um, it says, Sherem. I don't think it was the first time that he tried to go head to head with Jacob. It said Sherem sought much opportunity to go head to head with Jacob, and so it sounds
Interesting,
like
yeah.
it sounds like maybe he's had more than one run in with. But this might have been like the final match, the final bout between the two of them. Um, and it and Sherem kept his cool during that. And then I fast forward a little bit and I look at Alma because Alma had to deal with three of them. He had to deal with Nehor, he had to deal with Amalekite, and then he had to deal with Amalekite, or then he had to deal with Korihor, um, and later Amalekite. But um, I think I would have been tired of dealing with people who are constantly trying to, tear down the church and cause destruction. And I think maybe Alma had a different perspective because he had been that guy. And so maybe he saw something of himself in the people that were lashing out against the church or trying to drive something away, some inner hurt or something that was going on with them. Um, and he seemed to keep his composure too and just continually point out the doctrines. And the key to both of those is that they knew the doctrine. They knew what the doctrine of Christ was. So any sort of argument that these antichrists were bringing up, he could easily debunk it. He wasn't set back on his heels because he understood the doctrine of Christ, and that's what Sherem was trying to overthrow, was the doctrine of Christ ultimately. Um, and so, if we're talking about applicable terms to our day, if we ever want to be able to defend our positions, then it requires us to actually be in the scriptures and understand the doctrine of Christ and understand what the Book of Mormon is trying to teach us about Jesus Christ. And it requires some homework on our part. Or when these antichrists come, they're going to easily be able to overwhelm us with Gish Gallop arguments and all these other things that they're going to throw at us. And we're going to be so overwhelmed that we're going to start to doubt ourselves. And where was that Dear Uchtdorf? That was like doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. Um, you can be overwhelmed really easily if you are not entrenched in the scriptures with the Spirit every day. And I think that's the key.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's surprising how basic the defense is, and yet it's so effective. We just need to keep doing those simple things. And oftentimes, when you see the antichrists, they are often those who have just forgotten to do the basics over such a long period that the Book of Mormon uses that term. Their faith has dwindled, and I feel really, it's a really sad term, faith dwindling, because it's very evocative of, you can imagine a flame just slowly dying, and it's so simple to keep that flame alive, and yet just dwindles. I find that so sad. So I totally agree with what you're saying, and I'm really passionate in just keeping up the basics,
I
not having a complex faith.
I think it's important to point out that all of the antichrists in the Book of Mormon were Nephites. They all came from within.
Mm.
They were believers at one point, or at least the book alludes to that they were Nephites at one point and believers. It wasn't Lamanites coming in from the outside, unbelievers. These were people who had a testimony at one point, and like you said, maybe stop doing the things that would fortify them against arguments and deceptions. I mean, in the end, Korihor says, "I always knew there was a God." I mean, obviously, he had a testimony at one point, um, and he just let deception of Satan, in his case, that it it's slightly ironic that he says that there is no God, but when an angel of light appears to him, he believes the angel. So I'm not really sure what his whole story is, but it is worth noting that these arguments that come and the biggest cause of issues within the church in the Book of Mormon came from within inside, whether that's the Antichrist or the Gadianton robbers or the Kingmen. They were all came from internal advocacy or um, people trying to change the operation or the order of how the church was established.
It's such a fascinating point, because I mean, I think of that phrase, "Be watchful unto prayer always," as we see in the scriptures, and I think, like, yeah, I don't ever want to get into that position, and I also feel like I don't want to get up on my Ramiumpton and
No,
kind of
absolutely
look
not.
down on
Yeah.
these antichrist. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I'm definitely pro Christ. I'm not antichrist, but I just yeah, I think, like, yeah, I can't be prideful or have hubris in my own position. I've got to, we're kind of all capable of becoming like that. We all have it within us, but we also all have it within us to become like Christ. And I think it's which direction are you going in is most important. So it's fascinating to consider that point, that they were all Nephites. I'm interested, Jeff, if there were any other rules or plays or strategies of the adversary that you wanted to include in the book, but maybe didn't have room for, or if you were doing a second edition, are there any extras that you think are important but not included?
Yeah, I wish I wrote that down. I got to see if I can find it. It's funny you should ask. I had like three others that I wrote down. One was secret combinations. Um, the second was fostering a victim mentality. Laman and Lemuel were like the kings of being the victim and everything. Nephi was always the one that was victimizing them in some way, shape, or form. And then fostering apathy. This whole sort of all is well in Zion, so I don't need to do anything sort of thing that happens. Like I can stop because things are going well. You know, sort of this built on success, so I can just kind of coast, or I've done it. I've done it, so I don't need to keep trying, type of thing. So those were the three that I kind of wrote down that could be. I'd have to go look for more. I'm sure there are more that I missed. So
it's interesting because this is obviously the Antichrist Playbook, and so much of it, as we've determined, are rules for ourselves as members of the church to watch out for. And this is coming from someone who was a convert to the church. As you've mentioned a couple of times, you're a Protestant elder. What things, both good and bad, have you taken away from your previous religious affiliation that, I don't know, can help you approach your faith with fresher eyes than those of us who were born and raised in the church and don't have that experience of participating actively in another religion?
yeah, that's a good question. One thing that I, I think I've come in with a perspective of not necessarily questioning everything. I don't question everything. Maybe as a millennial, I do question everything, but I don't have those built-in traditions that we have in the church because I don't have the background to that. So when we do things, I can easily step back and go, okay, is this a doctrinal thing that we're doing? Is this a cultural thing that we're doing? Why are we doing this? And sometimes it's a good thing that we've been doing, and sometimes we're just perpetuating something that's been done years and years and years and years. So it allows me to maybe question in a faithful lens, because I'm not entrenched in growing up in it. And so I can question it without it ruining my faith, if that makes sense. I can question pieces of the gospel without it ruining my faith because different things haven't been instilled with me from birth. So also when things go differently at church, I'm not so entrenched in how it's done. We have a I don't know if you were watching the Sunday morning session of conference. It was Sunday morning. They sang a song called "Welcome Home." The Tabernacle Choir. It's one of the new songs. So that song was written about a guy in our ward. His name's Demetrius, and he is a convert from the Baptist faith. and he would stand outside the church and he would say, "Welcome home to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints," and he would welcome people. Um, and that kind of set people back because people aren't uh, that they don't greet people like that at the door. But to me, it was like that was like, okay, cool. That's kind of a Protestant thing anyway going on. Um, and when he first bore his testimony at church, he got up and he started singing in his testimony, and he was singing joy bells. I've got joy bells, and he would say amen, and he would ask for amens, and I was loving it. I was like, I was eating it up. But I was looking around at other people around me that first Sunday, and people were visibly uncomfortable because they hadn't experienced it before. And so um, it's since gotten better. He's been a member for 10 years, and so people are very used to it now. But um, that didn't shake me because I was able to look at it and see the spirit that he was bringing. Um, I wasn't bound to this tradition of how a fast and testimony meeting was supposed to go because, again, I didn't grow up in it. Um, so I was able to see some good things and integrate those without being completely offended or, um, how dare you offend our sensibilities type of thing. And I hope that makes sense. What I'm describing does that make sense?
Yeah, it reminds me of, so everyone's been hearing about the conversion story of Dusty Smith recently that's been going around on social media, and how his wife was Baptist, I believe, and was not intending to join the church like Dusty was. And yet Elder Uchtdorf said to her, bring what you already know and have, and we'll add to it. And I love that framing of it, in that, you know, we we have our quirks as Latter-day
Yes,
Saints,
we
but
do.
really we're home for everyone, whatever religious baggage you have. Like, I had a similar thing where we taught and baptized a guy in Malaysia, and he was asked to pray at one of his first weeks as a new convert in the elders quorum meeting opening thing, and he recited the Lord's Prayer, and you could see the looks of all the faces, like, what is going on? But it was also so sweet, and no one mocked him. It was a beautiful moment, and obviously for us missionaries, it was a great opportunity to teach in a lesson together at a later point about prayer and praying.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I thought that was wonderful. Religious baggage there. But interesting, on the flip side of that, how did you avoid deception as a new convert? So it was good for you to have a different perspective on those things. But what about all the people trying to tear down your newfound faith as a Latter-day Saint?
Yeah, I had a fair amount of that. Um, some of my family was, I would say, less than enthusiastic about me joining the church.
Yeah.
Um, I was, uh, there was some thought that I might go on and become a pastor. That was kind of one of the plans. Um, maybe of the church that I had gone to since I was a youth. Um, my grandma, um, love her to death, threatened to quote unquote disown me if I got married or if I got baptized in the
Wow.
church and got married in the temple. Um, that didn't happen, but um, I had plenty of people, friends who would, you know, that were worried about me. I'm worried you're going to hell. Um, those types of things. I had people that would question, what we do in the temple and those types of things. I think a couple things helped me to avoid um, deception, avoid kind of falling away at that point. One was that I had already knew the scriptures, and so I felt like um, what the missionaries had taught me was fit in right with what I believed in anyway. So I wasn't really changing much in the way that I thought about things. Um, for lack of a better term, I was probably a dry Mormon before I joined the church. because I didn't have a real strong belief in the Trinity. Um, I it really could have gone either way, but I knew the Bible, and so really everything that they said logically fit with what I kind of my framework. And the second was my wife. I She was my girlfriend at the time, but I could go back to her and I could go, "Hey, what about this that I'm hearing?" And she would be able to tell me, XYZ, and I'd be like, "Okay, that makes sense," you know. So having someone to bounce that off of, there wasn't I couldn't get on to the internet and find a fair LDS, all these answers, or Mormon, or all these other things that have all these answers to things that I would have been asked in the past. Um, so not having some of those resources made me probably a little bit more vulnerable, but I think because I knew the scriptures and I already had a relationship with God, and then I had my wife as kind of this sounding board, I think that helped me not um, start to question everything and then leave what I was learning.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So I've taken away a lot of valuable things from this, and there's a lot of things to think about, and that's a great thing about the book too. And so I'm thinking in closing, what's your final message to people listening? What would you leave them with? The big crux of your message.
Yeah, the big crux of my message, and um, I end the book with this, and it really is. Even though this book is about antichrists in the Book of Mormon and antichrists that are out there in the world trying to tear down faith, we really need to take a step back and look for patterns of apostasy in our own life that lead us to um, question our faith. Um, no one can make us um, leave the church. That is a decision we have to make on our own. But um, when we start to see these patterns of personal apostasy, whether it's um, starting to criticize the brethren, or getting angry, starting to deny that, the big one for me is denying that Christ's um, atoning sacrifice, that you are beyond help of the atonement. And I talk about that in the church, like denial that you that or thinking that you're so bad that you cannot be redeemed. And I think that is a message that Satan would want us to believe, that we are past redemption. And Jeffrey R. Holland said, no matter how far you think you've gone, you're never beyond the reach of Christ's atonement. Um, and so that would be my ultimate message: is if we start to see these patterns in our own life, that we need to be aware of and constantly on guard for, then we need to go back to the Savior and apply that atoning sacrifice and that power, that endowment of power that comes with that, to our lives, to help us kind of get back on the straight and narrow in the covenant path. And we're never beyond Christ's reach.
Hmm. That's a beautiful message to end on, Jeff. It's a really hope-filled message. Amongst all of the annoying facets of studying the antichrists that are helpful but frustrating nonetheless that they happen. It's a really hopeful message to end on. So, where can people get the book, and where can people find you and keep up to date with your work as well?
Yeah, so you can find the book at plainandpreciouspublishing.com. Um, we hope that it'll soon be in Deseret Book. We don't have a date on that yet.
Mm.
Um, that's a goal of ours. If you want to follow me, the best place is on Instagram. It's Jeff Borders Books. That's the account, and I try to interact with people on there. And we got some more content that's coming up here soon that I'm working with some other guys to produce some stuff on the different rules. That'll be coming up soon, hopefully here in May, and that's where you can find me.
That's exciting. And for people who want a copy of the book for themselves or for a gift for one of their youth, you can get it in the description. I'll put a link in. So thank you very much, Jeff, for your time. It's been fantastic to speak to you.
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.